Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. Last month, the good folks over at A Renewed Hope announced their plans for rotation for the ARH Standard format, as well as their release and refresh schedule for the upcoming year and beyond. This rotation scheme eschews the block rotation mechanism that had been previously utilized by Fantasy Flight in favor of a first in, first out, set-triggered rotation that instead revolves around a curated and maintained core set of FFG cards. And while, as with any such change, there are drawbacks, the overall advantages of evolving ARH Standard rotation into a more fluid yet fundamentally stable structure far outweighs any of these concerns. Not only is it the best fit for the fan-led continuation of Destiny, but it puts ARH Standard in line with what many of the long-time TCGs have been doing very, very successfully for years. Today, I'm breaking down the new rotation scheme and explaining why I'm a huge proponent of this structure for a more consistent and sustainable Star Wars Destiny. Hey Star Wars Destiny folks, thank you for joining me again here on Dice Commando and the Commando Cast. Thank you for joining me on your Friday morning. So yeah, talking today about the new ARH, and actually that's not true, right? It's not new because it's for ARH Standard, they haven't had a rotation scheme yet really, right? So this is their be implemented one. And when I say new, I just mean, as compared to what we've been used to with the previous FFG set where the blocks rotated out at the same time. So before we get into this today, right, basically two things. One, there's always people out there who aren't a fan of rotation. I get it. I think at this point, most of those people have been weeded out largely. Like, you're probably not in ARH Standard anymore if you don't like rotation, right? And this isn't a discussion about whether rotation's good or it isn't. But instead, it's looking at what, the best type of rotation would be for where we are within Destiny right now, right? And going forward in perpetuity for a fan-led set, right? Which would differ from, something else. So yeah, and then, the second part of this is just throwing out the disclaimer that a couple, I think it was like a year ago, maybe even more, kind of in the Wayback Machine, let's say this, I had released an episode about my ideal Destiny dream. This was actually way before I think even ARH's first set came out. I was talking about what I thought an ideal rotation format would look like with a fan-led format, fan-led sets, and so on. And it's this, what I'm showing right here is, the key image from there was, basically I proposed that there be a core set of permanently legal FFG cards, and the fan sets would rotate around that, right? Now, I had chosen 600 at the time, and that was basically just to keep the card pools equivalent with what we were used to from Fantasy Flight. So, just like I said, it's different, but the fundamental concept is the same, right? It's shared. So I think it's like I said, I'm predisposed to kind of like their thing because it's kind of what I had been driving for before. But obviously, what they decided on, I think ultimately is actually better. Right. So going through their announcement, what they're doing, what ARH is doing, is they are coming up with their core set of FFG legal cards, FFG made cards that are now reprint legal. Basically, is the term, right? The term's kind of fluid, but basically it's FFG cards that are going to be legal within ARH Standard. Okay. Now, they've come up with a number that's going to be about 100 cards, which I don't think is, if you're comparing it to my number before, it's like, well, Andrew, you said 600, where does that fit in? Well, first off, they're going to have basically 6 expansion sets legal. Now, there's a couple pieces of this from a pure number standpoint that I think are interesting, right? Because their sets have been slightly smaller, and then the core set is slightly smaller. than I had proposed. But again, let's put this in perspective, right? There's actually a couple moving things here. One, if you go back to the old FFG sets, how many of the cards within any one of those sets were not physically, they were all physically playable, but functionally playable? It was roughly maybe half to 2/3 of the set would actually functionally see play. Maybe a little bit more than that in like the niche and the tribal type decks. But functionally, you didn't have the whole set being relevant, right? So even of, the 1,200 cards or whatever that it was, you really only had 600 to 800 of those that were functionally useful in one instance or another, and that's probably being generous, right? So them coming in with 100 versus 150, I think, is no big deal. So, you have that there. And then the other part of the way that they've decided to do the core set is, at least as it exists right now, based on the previous, voting, if you go and you look at the cards that are legal in the core set, like, over the course of, even let's say Infinite, right? Over the course of every card ever printed by FFG, if we go look at the core set, like those 100 cards are the cards that saw like 95% of the play, right? So that those 100 cards carry so much more weight than many other cards, than many of the other cards in the entire library. So I think that the numbers they've decided on, I think, are reasonable, and whether it becomes 100 or 120 or something like that in the future, that's peanuts in this discussion. But I think they have a really solid plan here, right? Now, I spoke to the fact that there are disadvantages to this, right? And the only real disadvantage is something that I enjoyed, right? I enjoyed in the block rotation format, I enjoyed the ebb and flow. Well, there's two things. There's the ebb and flow, and then there's the trilogy part of it, right? And they're both tied. What I mean by the ebb and flow is that when a block would rotate out, you'd lose roughly half. No, because you'd be backfilling. So you'd lose, I don't know, roughly 30 to 40% of your cards, right, would go out because you get backfilled with some new stuff, right, when the new set, right? But my point is 3 sets would go out, 1 set would come in, right? So you lose, in that case, it's actually 33%, right, net. So you do lose that. And I did enjoy that new, smaller format and not just because it made it easier, but it changes how things play, right? When there's less cards available, especially in like a trilogy format, right? Like think about like a trilogy format when there's only one set out. There's only like 4 or 5 decks, and you get into this thing where like every card matters, and like the niche deck building, and like you start to build decks that play against the other decks in the meta. It becomes this very tightly controlled thing. I really enjoy that for a small period of time, right? I really do. And we are going to lose that, right? Because with the set that they have now, when set 6 comes in, 7 comes in, 1 get bumped out, you always maintain ad infinitum roughly the same card pool, right? You don't lose 33% of your cards. You maybe lose like 2 or gain 2, right, in terms of total numbers. So you don't have that natural ebb and flow. You don't have that change overall to your total number available and the way that the meta shapes up, because it does affect the way the meta shapes up, right? Plus remember, there was always a difference in the craziness level too between when it was legacy, it was previous block plus legacies, the craziness level between that and when we got to Across the Galaxy, when there was a lot more stuff available, a lot more lines of play, you're building on to develop play plus developing the crazy stuff. It's a very, very different format. So you lose some of that ebb and flow, right? The advantage, though, is basically the opposite of that, which is the card pool is always the same size. I mean, like I said, roughly always the same size. So it makes them far, far easier. It makes it far, far easier for them to basically control everything. Now, ultimately, once we reach steady state, right, once they get to 1 through 6 and then 7 pops in, right, once we get to that fully filled rotation, it becomes very, very easy for them to start to control things also from a design standpoint, right? I mean, this first in, first out thing, they don't need to worry about stacking. If something's bad, they can just kill it, and then within a year, it's gone, right? Whereas with the stacking of the trilogy stuff, it takes longer, and the impact is there, right? Something that's wrong in block 1 does impact the design of the next 2 sets because it was part of that design, whereas now they can just kill it, right? So they have a lot of design advantages there as well. And like I said, the impact of a mistake can be muted far, far easier in something like this, right? And this is not giving them a get out of jail free card. That's not where I'm going here. It's just, realistically, things happen, and it becomes far, far easier to control. The other part of this, I think an important part of this, is the way that they've designed, or sorry, not designed, the way that they've decided to approach that centerpiece, the core set, by also doing mid-cycle updates on the core set, right? And by mid-cycle, I mean in between expansion updates on the core set, allows them to do a lot of fixes and changes before the next set even hits, right? So they can go, they're like, all right, look, we through testing, or, well, let's not necessarily say that, right? Because that means that they should have maybe not designed it. But the point is, they can ever evolve that core set instead of being hamstrung necessarily to what's in the core set. That's really more what I was trying to say, right? And to be very clear, I wasn't saying, well, Mean Streets exists, Mean Streets is a bad card because I want to design something else, right? That's not where I was going with that. My point was that, if they're finding that they're hamstrung by what's in the core set, they can always evolve the core set, and it gives them a lot more design space to run, and they can bring it back in. The other advantage, the final advantage of this, is that with that active rotation, creep will be managed. It will be easier for them to manage creep, because you don't need to worry about having a big hitter to build on, right? Your big hitter doesn't need to build on the set before it to make the, like look at Legacies, right? If you compare Legacies block with Way of the Force, those two were pretty well managed. Across the Galaxy hit, boom, through the roof. Why? Because you were bringing in a small number of cards into the largest pool. In order to make a splash, those cards had to be big, right? Now, Fantasy Flight with their block thing would feel comfortable doing that, because that set would be legal for the shortest period of any block, right? Because the whole block, or any set within the block, because the block rotates out at the same time. So they were more comfortable dropping those big bombs in the last set. That encourages creep. Right, 100% encourages creep. The ARH guys, because what they're doing is this first in, first out rotation, each set has to be managed within the pool itself. You can't just be swinging haymakers, because everything else becomes, they don't have, or I should say it the other way, they don't have to come in with haymakers, because everything else is linearly managed, right? So there's a lot of really good things about this, which the ARH guys, obviously that's why they're doing this, right? There's a lot of good things about this, both from a player standpoint, both from a design standpoint, and really the only thing we lose are kind of the, ebb and flow, more player style feeling of having the warbling card pool, which is also an advantage, right? That you don't have the warbling card pool. So anyway, hopefully I think I've said my piece today. I think what they're doing, what they're proposing, is very, very good. Keep in mind, they can, of course, change it in the future if they want to. But there's a lot of moving pieces that they have in managing this, of having the sets and having the core set move around it. And even though those more pieces is going to be ultimately more work for them in the long run, right? Because they have to manage the core. I know they're not calling it the core, but you guys know what I mean, right? They have to manage the core in addition to the other design stuff, which, yes, is more moving pieces. However, it gives them a lot more flexibility to not have to go in and design chaff, and it's really going to let them manage creep better, I believe, in the long run, because they don't need to worry about boredom, because stuff will rotate out, and then, hey, we need a new Darth Vader, or hey, we need a new Jyn Erso. So anyway, very, very, very good. I'm a huge fan. So let me know what you guys are thinking about it, right? What else would you like to see, right? If you were doing it, what would you do? What are other advantages? What are other disadvantages, right? There may be disadvantages, certainly are disadvantages I'm not thinking about. So anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking. Thanks for tuning in today, and go Commando.